Hubris and haughtiness at Harvard University and inside higher ed. That is the topic of today's video. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. So there's a lot going on in the world of college admissions these days. Even though it's April, it's usually a quieter month. But this month, this April 2025, it is not so quiet because the U.S. federal government, the Trump administration, sent a letter to Harvard University on April 11th, 2025, and you were looking at it. And this is a letter that will go down in history, I think, because of not just what it's asking, but also the way in which Harvard responded. But before I share with you what Harvard responded with, I want to make sure you're aware of the admissions-focused requests in the letter sent from the government of the United States to Harvard University. And because, again, I am a college admissions expert, I am not a general society commentator. I'm not going to comment on all of the requests. I'm going to specifically focus on the requests that the Trump administration of the United States is making to Harvard as it relates to its desire for the Trump administration's desire for admissions reform at Harvard. In particular, Harvard is being requested by the government of the United States to do the following: institute merit-based admissions reform. By August 2025, the university must adopt and implement merit-based admissions policies and cease all preferences based on race, color, national origin, or proxies thereof throughout its undergraduate program, each graduate program individually, each of its professional schools, and other programs. Such adoption and implementation must be durable and demonstrated through structural and personnel changes. All admissions data shall be shared with the federal government and subjected to a comprehensive audit by the federal government. And non-individualized statistical information regarding admissions shall be made available to the public, including information about rejected and admitted students broken down by race, color, national origin, grade point average, and performance on standardized tests during the period in which reforms are being implemented, which shall be at least until the end of 2028. During this same period, the Dean of Admissions for each program or school must sign a public statement after each admissions cycle certifying that these rules have been upheld. International admissions reform. By August 2025, the university must reform its recruitment, screening, and admissions of international students to prevent admitting students hostile to the American values and institutions described in the U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence, including students supportive of terrorism or anti-Semitism. Harvard will immediately report to federal authorities, including the Department of Homeland Security and State Department, any foreign student, including those on visas and with green cards, who commits a conduct violation. As above, these reforms must be durable and demonstrated through structural and personnel changes, comprehensive throughout all of Harvard's programs, and during the reform period, shared with the federal government for audit, shared on a non-individualized basis with the public, and certified by deans of admission. And finally, viewpoint diversity in admissions and hiring. By August 2025, the university shall commission an external party which shall satisfy the federal government as to its competence and good faith to audit the student body, faculty, staff, and leadership for viewpoint diversity, such that each department, field, or teaching unit must be individually viewpoint diverse. This audit shall begin no later than the summer of 2025 and shall proceed on a department-by-department, field-by-field, or teaching unit-by teaching unit basis as appropriate. The report of the external party shall be submitted to the university leadership and the federal government no later than the end of 2025. Harvard must abolish all criteria, preferences, and practices, whether mandatory or optional, throughout its admissions and hiring practices that function as ideological litmus tests Every department or field found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by hiring a critical mass of new faculty within that department or field who will provide viewpoint diversity. Every teaching unit found to lack viewpoint diversity must be reformed by admitting a critical mass of students who will provide viewpoint diversity. If the review finds that the existing faculty in the relevant department or field are not capable of hiring for viewpoint diversity, or that the relevant teaching unit is not capable of admitting a critical mass of students with diverse viewpoints, hiring or admissions within the department, field, or teaching unit shall be transferred to the closest cognate department, field, or teaching unit that is capable of achieving viewpoint diversity. This audit shall be performed, and the same steps taken to establish viewpoint diversity every year during the period in which reforms are being implemented, which shall be at least until the end of 2028. So, you can imagine that did not go over well at Harvard. There were, of course, other requests as well. Basically, this letter was framed as you need to do this or your funding will be at risk. And the federal government, the U.S. taxpayers, fund Harvard to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. So the current administration of the United States believes that these are requests that are fair to provide Harvard in order to DEI the place, or de-wokeify the institution, or basically make sure that the ideologically captured institution that is Harvard becomes an institution of higher education, higher learning again. Now, you may not agree with this approach, but this is the approach that the Trump administration is taking. Harvard, again, did not respond positively to this. And here is the letter that Harvard shot back to the federal government a few days later. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but long story short, it's saying that Harvard is committed to fighting anti-Semitism and other forms of bigotry, which is, of course, a very dubious statement considering what's happened there in the last couple of years. But even so, that's not my focus on today's video. But the big takeaway is what you can find on the bottom of the second page of the letter that was written by Harvard's counsel to the federal government, which is Harvard remains open to dialogue about what the university has done and is planning to do to improve the experience of every member of its community. But Harvard is not prepared to agree to the demands that go beyond what Harvard deems to be the lawful authority of this or any other U.S. administration. So once that letter was received, Harvard was notified that $2 billion plus in funding would be frozen. That was intended for Harvard is no longer going to be available to Harvard. And there's been sort of a tit for tat back and forth on social media and on Harvard's newly developed website, sort of marketing its decision to stand up to the Trump administration. And look, at the end of the day, Harvard has a lot of hubris, and that hubris has been developed, and haughtiness, frankly, over generations now, because for generations, Harvard has gotten away with what it's been doing. So they're not in the mood to negotiate because they've gotten away with this for years, decades. And why should they stop now? They're trying to hold their breath like they're underwater at Harvard to just get to the next Democrat administration in the U.S. That's all Harvard is trying to do. They're going to put up a fight now because they think they can litigate it out over a number of years. And they may be right. But that's basically what they're doing. They're just holding their breath like they're underwater, hoping and praying that in 2028, that there will be a Democrat administration that unravels each and every executive order and each and every letter that has been sent to Harvard since Trump took office. And therefore, they're just going to be able to go on their merry way and keep conducting business like they've been conducting business. And of course, you know this to be true. I know this to be true because of look at the way Harvard reacted to its loss at the Supreme Court in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. Harvard was basically found guilty of practicing race and ethnicity-based discrimination. And Harvard didn't do a darn thing other than say, we're going to keep doing everything we can to have a diverse class at our school. And basically what they did at that point is they considered students' racial experiences in the application process, the next admission cycle, as opposed to students' racial statuses. Big whoop. When analyzing students' racial experiences through their writing or their letters of recommendation, you're basically still using a proxy for race. So that was something that the Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts said was a big no-no, but they continue to do it at Harvard. And it's no wonder why they continue to do it. No one at Harvard was fired. No one at Harvard retired as a result of the Supreme Court decision finding that Harvard had been discriminating on the basis of race for years. William R. Fitzsimmons is still kicking over there. He is still the dean of admission, and he's the gentleman who has been doing this for decades. And there was no repercussions for the fact that the Supreme Court found basically that Harvard needed to change. Harvard changed as little as absolutely possible in order to comport with its interpretation of the Supreme Court ruling. So it's no wonder, of course, that Harvard is just going to keep playing by what it deems to be its own rules. Harvard thinks it makes up the rules. Harvard is an institution defined by ideological capture and hubris, and of course, haughtiness. We are all just peasants. We are all just onlookers who are not as smart, apparently, as the people at Harvard. And therefore, we are just too square or too dull or too stupid, apparently, to see what's going on. That is not the case, of course. Visit areyouontracktogetin.com to complete a free 3-minute assessment, the results of which will help you clarify whether or not you are, or your student is, on track for selective college admission in the United States of America. Now, Inside Higher Ed, which wrote this up, a gentleman by the name of Liam Knox over at Inside Higher Ed, who basically is on board with the program, let's just put it that way, that all of these institutions are perpetrating on the student population of the United States and other countries who are applying to these institutions, wrote a piece on the 14th, basically summarizing what's going on in his mind, or from his perspective, let's just put it that way, and Inside Higher Ed's perspective. And basically, this is the perspective of all those who run in the circles of higher education admissions teams and professionals. And the piece was called, "Is Admissions Trump's Next Higher Ed Target? The administration wants comprehensive admissions reform at colleges. It's unclear what that means or how it would be enforced, but pressure to avoid scrutiny could affect admissions practices." Again, we have someone here, Liam Knox, who just thinks that we're all peasants who don't know how to read. We don't even know how to think, or critically think particularly, because if they actually did not condescend or patronize their readers over at Inside Higher Ed, they would know that we could read the letters that the United States sent to Harvard, and we could read the Harvard letter that was sent back to the United States. But gosh, Liam Knox thinks that we just don't understand, and no one in higher ed understands exactly what the United States is asking for. What the federal government of the United States is currently asking for is a de-Bathification program in admissions offices across the United States, or a de-Nazification program in admissions offices across the United States. Now, again, I want to make very clear that I do not believe that members of admissions offices are ideologically aligned with the Ba'athist party in Iraq during Saddam Hussein's rule. And I do not believe that members of admissions offices at selective colleges and universities across the United States are aligned with the Nazi party during Adolf Hitler's rule in Germany. However, what the United States government is basically asking for is the cleansing of an ideology from admissions offices in a way that the United States tried, and actually was successful in Germany, at implementing after the fall of the two regimes I just mentioned, the Saddam Hussein regime in Iraq and the Nazi party, Hitler's party in Germany after World War II. No Nazis were allowed the day after World War II ended in Europe to run for government again, run Germany again. I mean, maybe a handful got away with it if they were lower level and they somehow wormed their way back into government. But at the end of the day, the entire top of those parties was for, if they survived World War II and if they survived the invasion of Iraq, were not supposed to return to government right away. This is particularly true in Germany after World War II. There was a denazification program. Well, it's very clear what the United States wants. The United States, its current government, wants the individuals who have been conducting race-based admissions for years to be swapped out of admissions offices, because we know that from the last 2 admission cycles, especially since Harvard has released it or will release it shortly, the second one after SFFA v. Harvard, that there's really not any change that all these institutions claimed would have happened as a result of the admissions ruling at the Supreme Court. There's been really no significant change to racial, ethnic composition of these classes, which these institutions themselves argued would be the very obvious outcome of any ruling against race-based admissions, which happened. So the fact that there has not been a change means that something has changed in the offices to account for the fact that they are still practicing some sort of race-based admissions preferences over at these institutions. So don't play dumb, Liam. Don't play dumb, and don't treat us as if we're dumb. This is what Liam writes. Again, complete haughtiness, complete hubris on the part of, in this case, Inside Higher Ed. Exactly what the Trump administration believes is going on behind closed doors in highly selective college admissions offices remains unclear. The University of California system has been prohibited from considering race in admissions since the state outlawed the practice in 1996. And both Harvard and Columbia have publicly documented changes to their admissions policies post-SFFA, including barring admissions officers from accessing the applicant pool's demographic data. Regardless, given the DOJ investigations and demands of Columbia and Harvard, not to mention potential demands and newly targeted institutions like Princeton, Northwestern, and Brown, the federal government appears set to launch a crusade against admissions offices. You're darn right. You are darn right, Liam Knox. Yes, so the crusade against admissions offices is very well founded from the perspective of the Trump administration and frankly the perspective from yours truly, which is that there was no de-Bathification, there was no de-Nazification, there was no de-wokeification of these admissions officers. So all the same people who've been perpetrating racism for years in these admissions offices are still there by and large. So, of course, the administration wants to do something because as the first statistics came out after the affirmative action ruling, it was very clear that Harvard continued to practice race-based discrimination. Okay? So stop making us feel like we're idiots because we're noticing it. Okay, Liam? Okay, Harvard? And, of course, I laugh at the UC mention, the mention of the University of California system. University of California has been explicit with what they do to work around affirmative action and how they work like heck to get around the state ban that the voters put into place on affirmative action. And the way they do it, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is that they have different standards for different high schools based off zip code and how economically disadvantaged that zip code apparently is. So there are higher standards for a high-performing school filled with Asians and white students in California for admission to UC Berkeley and UCLA than there are for students applying from, quote-unquote, an underserved school that is full of Hispanics and or blacks in California. And they get away with this by not performing race-based discrimination in the UC system against individual students. They're performing race-based discrimination against individual high schools. Okay, so don't treat us like we're stupid. This is going on. This is public. They bragged about it up until the Democrat administration was thrown out of office. And now they're just acting like, oh no, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here at all. We don't know what you're talking about. That we are following the law. There's no ideological capture at our institution. We haven't fought like heck for years, for decades, to increase our numbers of Black and Hispanic students. No. We have not put our hands on the scale or our fingers on the scale or our whole bodies on the scale. No, in fact, we are just completely ideologically aligned with you guys, which is that, we believe in equality suddenly. Right. when all you've been talking about for years is equity, which is the exact opposite of equality. So it'll be very interesting, again, to see how this plays out. What we do know, at least, is that the Trump administration is going to give these colleges a hard time for 4 years. Now, whether or not there will be particular change that is long-lasting, or any change even that's short-lasting, I don't know. I really don't know. But I think it's wonderful that admissions officers are going to be under the microscope. I really do, because frankly, admissions officers, like all of us, have to follow the law in the United States. And for too long, those in Ivy Towers and other highly selective institutions have felt and acted as though they are above the law. And they are not. They are not above the law. The Civil Rights Act does not have an exemption for discriminating against Asians. The Civil Rights Act does not have an exemption for discriminating against whites. The Civil Rights Act does not have an exemption from discriminating against Americans versus international full-pay students. The Civil Rights Act does not have an exemption from discriminating against Jews. So it'll be very interesting to see what the Trump administration does and how these selective institutions respond. We do know that Harvard basically has said so far, we're not going to do it. They obviously have a $50 billion endowment, so they're going to be able to get furthest with fighting the Trump administration. Even other Ivies like Brown, Dartmouth have a fraction of that type of endowment, so they're not going to be able to get away for nearly as long without their federal funding. And if someone or an institution wants federal funding, they typically have to follow federal law. So stay tuned. This will be very interesting drama or soap opera over the coming weeks and months. How it will affect you if you're a parent of a student applying to college or a student applying as a first-year student to college is really to be determined, because, again, so far Harvard does not want to be controlled by even a board of individuals who may have parity ideologically. They are an entirely captured institution. It is a woke institution. It is a DEI-infused institution, and they do not tolerate dissent at Harvard. They do not tolerate dissent. The Overton window at Harvard is very narrow. There is not big. It's like a little hole. It's not a window at all. There is basically far Marxists on campus, all the way to basically left-wing Democrats. That's basically it. There's nothing else. There's nothing else. And so it's not actually a higher education institution. It is an ideological madrasa. That is what you find at Harvard. And if Harvard wants to keep doing that, they actually could keep doing that. They just renounce getting federal funding moving forward, and they can drop the fact that they're a tax-exempt organization, and they can just go on their merry way and be a private club for people who share those ideas that Harvard faculty and administrators share. But you can't have it both ways. You can't double dip. You can't say that you're a higher education institution that's tax exempt and deserves billions upon billions of dollars from the federal government, and at the same time discriminate against whites, Asians, Jews, and frankly American citizens in favor of international students who are full pay and who often hate the United States of America and its founding ideals, as well as other populations within the United States. You just can't do that and get away with it. So Harvard's going to have to make a choice. So far, it's made its choice, but how long that choice will last will depend, of course, on how hard the Trump administration pushes back. I don't know how hard they'll push back. They may lose interest in this today. They may want to go buy Greenland tomorrow, and that could become something that dominates their focus for the next 4 months to next 4 years. I don't know. So we will see, and I will keep you up to date. As we wrap things up, I want to remind you that you don't have to settle for the free videos alone. As you navigate the college admissions process, get the focused and personalized coaching and expertise you need to achieve your goals. My Smart Sessions meet you where you are in order to take you where you want to go. Meanwhile, if you want proactive support throughout the college application process and want to collaborate with a dedicated expert to submit applications that are simply meticulous, reserve your preferred Simply Meticulous experience as soon as possible. Space is limited due to the time and attention to detail required to pull off these extraordinary coaching experiences. No matter your distinctive objectives, you can achieve them If you'd like to work with me one-on-one, visit my website, which is collegemeister.com. And when you've finished your Common App and want to know if it's as strong as possible and whether or not in its current condition your chances of admission are impressive, inconclusive, or inadequate, you need my pre-read. Getting my pre-read now means having me review your entire application, just like an admissions officer or admissions committee will review it later, and receiving by email no later than the time you reserve a comprehensive report highlighting what's working and what's not on your full Common App and one Common App supplement. If you've yet to submit your Common App, my pre-read may motivate you to make adjustments to it before your deadline. If you've already submitted your Common App, my pre-read will prepare you for what I deem to be your likely admissions outcome at the institution in question. To purchase my pre-read now, go to mypreread.com. Again, that's mypreread.com. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. As mentioned previously, if you'd like to work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process, visit my website, which is collegemeister.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.